to go over your assessment notification. Now, this is going to be in a maths assignment, which you may not be familiar with how they work, and we don't really do them that often. So I'm going to talk through what you need to do in this assignment. First of all, it's being issued today, and it will be handed in on Monday in week 4. So we're giving you 3 weeks to do this. You also get 1 lesson in class to work on it as well. It is on the exact same topics as the original first task was, and it's still 30% weighting. Okay, now there's going to be 3 parts to this task. The first part is earning and managing money, and then part B is working with formulae and equations, and then part C is an extended response that actually kind of goes across both of them, but particularly formula and equations. Okay, so these are the outcomes that will be addressed, but what matters most is that it's a hand-in. You're going to complete the assignment as a Google Doc and submit it on Google Classroom, but on or before the due date. And during the assignment process, you need to take screenshots for particular questions and show evidence of research for other things as well. Okay, so the first part is on earning and managing money, and there are several points of questions that you need to go through. I'm not going to go through every question here, but I wanted to make it clear. Just read it, go through it, and you should be fine. Like you shouldn't come up with many questions. If you do have any questions, make sure you look at the rubric first before you ask your teacher. Okay, but any website that you need, we have the link for, and it'll take you straight to it. Make sure you do it, especially for this first question. In this part, you're going to be doing things to do with an occupation. Even if you know what job you want to do, we still want you to do this career quiz, okay? But you do not necessarily have to choose that occupation. It's just a way for you to kind of see what you should be doing potentially. Now, it's not, you don't have to do that when you go out of school, but it's just to give you an idea of what you might be good at. But regardless, you need to write a short paragraph. The rest of this part is all related to things that you learnt in class, but we're making it a real life application of those things. Okay, so just go through it, reference all the things that you did in class, and you should have a relatively clear idea of what you need to do. If there's things that you need to do external research for, make sure you include where you got that evidence from. Okay, you can do that as a bibliography, or just as part of the question you can say where it's from. Okay, whatever you find easier. When you get up to question 8, now question 8 is the last question of this part, you need to do a tax return form. Okay, when you do it, it will look like this. Now, this just goes to us for so we know what you answered. Okay, so even though we're asking for a date of birth and things like that, it's just to make it feel like a tax return, so you have an idea of how it works. Also, in a tax return, normally the ATO will calculate the tax for you. That's the whole point, to avoid mistakes. But we want to see how you could calculate it yourself. That's part of the assessment because it relates straight to the outcome. Okay, so you'll have to go through each section, just read each question carefully. But the best part about this form is you should have done most of the working in the previous 7 questions. Okay, it's just a way to compile all that information to make it as real life as possible. Okay. You also will need to calculate your tax. Use this tax table, the one in the notification. There are other ones for different years. Make sure it's the 2019 to 20 resident tax rates table. Okay, it might be a bit different to the one you've done in your workbook for school. Okay, for the second part B, for formulae and equations, you need to read this scenario, and then you need to answer 5 questions on this scenario. Those 5 questions are as close to an exam-like situation for this assignment. There is a right answer. It's not up to your opinion. and you can just go through the questions, but all the information for those questions will come from this excerpt of the scenario. Okay, so that's where you get the information from. The last part is the extended response. Now, we haven't put a word count on this because some people may struggle to write, and we understand that. We don't want to stress you out with a word count, but the expected length in regards to how much the essay, well, if you want to make it an essay, it's an extended response, so kind of treat it as one. It needs to have 2 to 3 body paragraphs with an introduction and a conclusion paragraph. Okay, and you need to provide evidence for your response and cite that evidence at the conclusion with a bibliography. Okay, that brings us to the marking criteria and rubric. So for part A, everything is here, you can see, and everything that you would do has a mark allocation to it. Okay, and if you were to get full marks for this section, you would get 22 marks. Just be careful when you're writing your responses for different things. Don't put too much time into things if it's only worth 1 mark. You know, as long as you've ticked this off on the marking criteria, you've got that mark. Don't spend any extra time. It's not necessary. However, when you get to a question like this, where it's worth 3 marks, make sure you do everything perfect. It's an assignment, and because you've got time to check, any errors in rounding and things like that will be penalized, so just be careful about that. For part B, it's very similar to what you'd expect from an exam. So if it's correct, you'll get full marks. The way I've written this marking criteria is you get 1 mark for getting close, as in you've made some progress, but it's not correct. There's an error. If there's anything more than an error, then 1 error, say there's 2 or 3 errors, you will not get full marks or any marks for these questions. Okay, for all of them, I've allocated 2 marks, 2 for a correct response, so 1 for almost there, 1 for getting it completely right. And if you were to do that all correctly, you would get 12 marks in total. For part C, it's a slightly different marking criteria. It's similar to what you would experience in English or religion, and that is the better you're writing, the more marks you will get for it. And what we mean by better writing is that you have an extensive understanding, is essentially an A response of how algebra is applied in the real world, and you need to have at least 3 pieces of evidence. So that's 3 paragraphs, 3 pieces of evidence. If you were to get in this 5 mark range, you need to have at least 2. So you could have more pieces of evidence. So you could have 3, but if you're only demonstrating a thorough understanding, you cannot get 6 marks. You can only get 5, okay? So the more evidence doesn't mean more marks. It's just what allows you to access those marks, okay? So be clear with that. Of course, if you don't get a right response, you will get 0, and the total possible marks is 6. So that brings a total of 40 marks for the entire assignment. The last thing I want to talk about is to make it easier for everyone to actually write their responses. I've made a template which is attached to the Google Classroom assignment. Make sure you write your name and what your class is, and then you can go through and answer everything. These questions are just copied and pasted from the notification, so it's easy for you to make sure that you've ticked everything off and you're actually answering what's meant to be answered. Make sure you include any screenshots where necessary and links if you use a link to a website for research or evidence, and that's basically the assignment. Now, the point of the video is just so you can have someone talk it through with you. However, if you need any more help with this, make sure you email your classroom teacher or myself, and we'll help you out with it. But just know you get one lesson in class, so you won't have any classwork to do. Then you'll just have your this assignment to get started, and the rest you'll do by yourself outside of class time or in your study periods, and it'll be due at 8:15 on the Monday of week 4. Okay, so everything should be here. It should be quite clear. I know it might look like a lot, but if you just chip away at it, particularly Part B can probably be done in about an hour maximum, just to make sure it's all correct, because it's just 5 questions similar to that you'd find in a textbook. So just make sure that they're correct. Okay, and I hope that all makes sense. And good luck with the assignment.